Violent black water threw Lexi around like a rag doll. She frantically clutched and clawed, desperate to find something to cling to, but she was helpless against the sea's enormous strength. She surfaced with a roaring intake of breath, and through the hazy foam watched with horror as the rocks now seemed miles away. She tried to shout, but where she hoped to find air, she found only salty, churning sea. She could only cough and swallow, finally ensnared by the deadly rip, the water closing over her head. On the rocks, Tom searched the water for Lexi, and although he could see her, he just couldn't reach. On the sand, Kate ran towards them all, Gus racing alongside. Vaulted and razor-tipped, one final growing wave arched towards them all. Its enormous power lifted and poised to crash into them. It brought more than water. It brought a lifesaver. Lexi felt a hand on her t-shirt. She was being dragged to the surface and away from the rocks. In front of her, a board appeared, and she reached out to cling to it. "Out you come," Alicia called as she lay on her board and hauled Lexi up. Lexi placed both hands on one side, and Alicia flipped the board over so that Lexi sprawled on top of it, finally out of the water. Alicia jumped on behind her, and they both began to paddle back out to sea, away from the rocks, away from the cliffs. "You okay?" Alicia called over the noise. "I'm fine. It's just those rocks." "Bella," Lexi panted. "Yeah, I saw it all. You were pretty brave for a beginner," Alicia called. "That's what you do for sisters," Lexi said. "Yeah, and for friends," Alicia smiled, and they continued to paddle away from danger. "Did you win?" Lexi suddenly realised that Alicia hadn't quite finished her turn. Alicia laughed. "No, I don't think so, but it doesn't matter. The skill is way more important than any medals." Lexi had to agree. As much as she'd liked the swimming medals and the Gymkhana rosettes from her old life, it was the skills she had learned there that helped her to surf here. Suddenly, life took on a very different perspective. Just then, Gus bounded into the water and launched himself out to sea. His golden fur soaked through immediately, and he began to swim, long legs pumping. "Gus, get out, stupid dog," Lexi called. "Gus, come here, boy," Duncan tried from the shallows. "Gus!" Kate yelled. Gus was not for listening. He paddled around for a while and then dipped his head into the water. He pulled it out again and sneezed. He tried again and was under for longer this time, but when he came back up, in his mouth was the board's leg cord. He pulled the board towards the shore, the girls on top, until they were able to put their feet down. Back on the beach, Bella and Kate turned to look at Lexi bouncing towards them. Kate watched as Lexi opened her arms and gave Bella the biggest hug, then wiped her sandy tears away. They all jumped and squealed as Bus bounded back onto the sand and shook out his fur in front of all of them. A short while later, after the ambulance crew had checked them all over, the family sat at the club watching the sun dip lower in the sky, and the children on the beach sitting around a large bonfire. Lexi watched her mother closely. She was sitting quietly, not smiling, not frowning. Lexi looked at Bella, who was also peering at Kate. Bella's ice cream was beginning to melt down her fingers as she concentrated on Mum's face. Duncan finally sat down with them, throwing a dog a biscuit and slurping his coffee. "Great result, eh, Kate?" he enthused, elbowing her in the arm. "Kate?" He slurped his coffee again. "Kate?" he said once more. Then he stopped and watched as a tear trickled down his wife's face. "Mummy, why are you crying?" Bella asked. She slipped off her seat and clambered onto her mother's lap as best she could, holding on to the melting ice cream. "What's wrong, Kate?" Duncan asked. Lexi continued to watch and remembered the last time her mother had cried, months ago on the school lawn. "What's the matter, Mum?" she said, her own chin wobbling with emotion. "It's just," her mother began, blowing her nose. "Today has been a real wake-up call. She sniffed. A few weeks ago, we lost Lexi, and we were lucky to find her when we did. But I was just, Lexi protested, but her mother shushed her. Today, we could have lost both of you girls, with the surfing and the rocks and losing Teddy and everything. She looked at both of them in turn and then turned to Duncan. The air around the table moved with a warm, dancing sea breeze, and the family was momentarily wrapped in a swirl of golden sand. I know you all like it here, and it is a wonderful place, but it scares me how little we know about Australia. If Lexi leaned in to hear better, the wind from the shore had strengthened. If what? Duncan asked, frowning. I like it here a lot, Mummy, Bella said, trying to be helpful. But if we have a problem, I mean like a big problem, then we have no one to turn to. It was so frightening today watching you girls slip and fall on the rocks. It could all have ended so differently. We were lucky to make it unscathed. Oh dear, Duncan said, taking her hand. We're all okay, Lexi soothed, don't worry. But I feel completely responsible for this family, Kate continued. I'm the reason we're here. It's my fault this happened. Her mother looked down. I think we may need to think about going back to Scotland. The family was quiet for a moment, looking at one another over coffee and melted ice creams. Duncan couldn't quite believe his ears. His wife was the strong one, the one who held them together with perseverance and love and sheer hard work. If she was rattled, he was lost. He didn't want to go home, back to the bank and all the demands. Kate, what are you saying? Do you really want to go back? Duncan said quietly. He was very happy here too, poor but happy. If she didn't feel the same, though, he had to consider the possibility that this dream may be over. What if something happened to me and I couldn't work? She said. How would we pay for everything? Well, there's my brother, but Rory and Joe are not responsible for this family. I am, and I am scared of doing a bad job. Lexi listened closely. She'd been here before. She recognised this conversation. This was the kind of things her parents said when they decided to come to Queensland. She frowned. I believe in you, Kate, Duncan said. But if you don't think you can do it, then I'll support any decision you want to make. Lexi shuffled in her seat, more and more cross with each passing moment. Neither she nor Bella were asked their opinion last time. Were they going to be asked this time? Bella licked her ice cream and watched Lexi. Teddy was still wet and dripping down her leg. She didn't care where she lived. She just wanted everyone to be happy. I'm not sure, Duncan. I'm just not. Kate stopped. Lexi grunted. Then she tutted. Then she placed her ice cream down on a napkin and stood up, planting her hands on her hips. Her face darkened. Her mother sat back in her seat as she watched her daughter rise. She recognised this look, but she hadn't seen it for a long time, not since they'd lived in Edinburgh. She waited for Lexi's explosion. This is not fair, Lexi said, slowly and sternly through gritted teeth. This is just not fair. You drag us all the way from Scotland and force us to live in this whole other country. She pointed out across the sea. The family remained silent, watching her every move. Then, once we get here, we have to live in a tiny apartment and share a bedroom and go to a dusty nowhere school. We have to walk to school and to the shops and everywhere. We have no money. There's no horse riding, no gymnastics, no ballet and no shopping. She paused for breath. I have to do chores and wash the car. I have to earn money for sweets. She stood with hands on hips once again, breathing hard, staring at her mother. It's hot, it's dusty, everything tastes funny, and I have friends who can't speak English. Exactly, Lexi. So you've never liked it here, so I thought that maybe we could, her mother began. No, I wasn't finished! Lexi stamped her foot. Her parents stopped in surprise and waited for more. Lexi's tone softened. I still love Scotland. It will always be special. But now I see why we came, she continued. Every day, Bella and I get up to lovely sunshine. We walk to school with Daddy. We play outside every break. On the weekends, we don't need to buy lots of treats or classes because the beach is right there in front of us. There's a swimming pool in our back garden and lots of friends to share it with. Daddy gets to play with bikes and he whistles again. The whole hospital has to do what you say, Mummy, because you're so important. And you were always really, really good at nagging. Her mother smiled. I never knew what a lychee was until I came here, Lexi continued. I never, ever spent any time with Bella. Now I know why everyone thinks she's so sweet. Bella beamed at her sister and Lexi smiled just a little. And there's surfing. Lexi threw her arms around to indicate the beach. I really love to surf, Mummy. I mean, I love it. Please don't take all this away from me now. She sat down and picked up her ice cream once again, although she didn't really feel like eating it now. You didn't ask what I wanted when we came here. Please listen to me now. Don't take all this away from me, she finished in a quiet voice, and then burst into tears. Bella climbed off Kate's lap and walked round to put both arms round her sister. Duncan looked at his wife and smiled ruefully. How could they argue with that? Lexi was always good at arguing, and that was one good argument. What a difference a few weeks made. You're right, darling, her mother said. We didn't ask you last time. So, can I surf? No, but you can join the Lifesavers Club with Alicia. She really did save your life today. Lexi jumped up and hugged her mother. I have to tell Alicia, she called and raced off to the bonfire. By the flickering light, Lexi made the announcement to her friends. Alicia was especially pleased and she hugged her. They all sat together and watched the flames for a while as the darkness fell. Traveller, there are no paths. Paths are made by walking, Lexi's voice whispered to her. I know, she replied out loud. As my ancestors say, we are as where we are, Tom said. And we're all just passing through, murmured Alicia. Lexi sighed happily. She looked deep into the fire and she knew that she was home.